Hi, I'm JJ. Welcome or welcome back. Today is my monthly wrap up. I've already did like a pre wrap up like halfway through the month. And then I've also done a lot of individual videos. So these are the books that I have not read or have not talked about that I read the rest of the month, except for the buddy read that I'm doing with Angelina, which is 100 Years of Solitude. So that video will be coming shortly. So this is the rest of them. And speaking of 100 Years of Solitude, I read or listened to an audiobook to get a little bit of context of that one. This one is called The Fish That Ate the Whale, The Life and Times of America's Banana King by Rich Cohen. And that's about Sam Zemurray, who basically took over the banana trade, merged with dozens of other companies, and then created United Fruit, which then ended up being the most influential and corrupt organization in during that time. So it actually had more power than a lot of the governments that it was trying to overthrow. It was kind of coordinated with the CIA, trying to get the presidents or the rulers of each country in Central and South America that they wanted to grow bananas in. If they didn't, do what they were told, or they tried to resist, they worked with them on how to overthrow them. And so what United Fruit was doing actually inspired the CIA on how to do their other coups in other countries. So they had a lot of influence, and Sam himself even founded or helped fund the state of Israel during the time. He was a Russian Jew. When he came to the United States, he was outcasted from all the Catholics and the Protestants there, and then he was also looked down upon from the German Jews there, because they were there for a while and they didn't like newcomers coming in. And what I didn't know at the time either was a lot of those were Southern Jews that were part of the Confederacy. So that was a interesting off-topic thing that I found out that I would like to research more into. But so he helped fund a lot of the settlements that illegally went in to Palestine, so that they could then create the state of Israel. And he also funded wars to either gain support for the Israel cause, or for once they were funded, he kind of helped funded wars, kind of giving back to the people who helped him, type of thing. So he had his hands in all kinds of stuff back then. He was very, very big, and nobody's ever heard of him, or not as much as he should have been for how influential he was at the time. But I wanted to read it specifically for that book because there's an aspect in that book that was talking about the banana trade, and it was just so interesting to find out how dangerous it is actually. You climb up in to try to get down the bananas. My cats are crazy. Hey. They try to climb up in there and get the bananas, and there's scorpions and stuff that were very deadly, which is why a lot of them now, still some boats have banana boxes, or no bananas allowed. It was because of the banana trade and how deadly these scorpions and stuff were, on top of the back-breaking work of climbing and trying to get them down and risk falling and this hard labor. They also had to build railways just to get through the areas and stuff like that. So it was very fascinating to see how they forced the development in all these nations that they were then trying to get the bananas from. And another thing that I learned, so bananas are actually not a fruit. They should be classified as a berry because they they're not trees, they're actually herbs that they're growing on, just very tall ones. And another thing that was fascinating is when you're in the forest and it's raining, when you have a big heavy rain, you can actually hear the growing of these banana trees. And that just is, that could be so many horror movies or the start of horror movies, just that alone, being able to hear trees grow. But they can grow like up to like 20 inches in 24 hours if they get that heavy rain, which was another really interesting thing that I learned. And so on top of all of that, you also get kind of like this backstory of a little bit of information of Che Guevara, which I definitely know that I've been wanting to read more of him because he keeps popping up everywhere that I've been reading. And Pablo Neruda is a poet, and he wrote a poem about the United Fruit Company and them coming down and the havoc that they were causing. And it was actually his poetry that got people more aware of the atrocities that were being produced by these banana companies. And he got, the people to want to stand up and fight, the governments of those areas to want to fight back. It was through his poetry more than anything else, just because of how art inspires and how it just takes one flame to light the forest on fire, so to speak. And so he was key to that, which I thought was very interesting. Not like the whole part of it, but just a spark that he needed. And then also during the 30s, there was inspection that spread that was killing all the bananas, so they had to create it like a pesticide to kill this infection. And they just sprayed it everywhere. They didn't care that it was going on the villages and the people and stuff. So a lot of people ended up getting very sick. They lost appetite, taste, smell. Some of them even turned blue because of the chemicals in this pesticide. And like hundreds up to 1,000 died specifically from that. So I just one of the many atrocities that they created. Also, bananas are all clones of each other, which I did not realize. And the Big Mike, which was the main banana that they were growing back here, the most common banana, up until the 60s when they had overprocessed it and it actually became extinct. But fun fact is, those were the bananas that a lot of the cartoons and references in the United States have, where you can slip on a banana peel, because when they would eat the bananas, they would just toss out the peel wherever they were, sidewalks, roads and stuff, and they had a very slippery surface, so they were at risk of slipping and falling because of these banana peels. The bananas went extinct, and the bananas that they use now do not have that slippery peel. So that is a reference from a long gone age, which also I found interesting. So I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts and stuff more with that book when I'm talking about 100 Years of Solitude. So I'm just going to quickly go down some of the other books that I read. Some of them will not be very quick because I had a lot to talk about and learn for those. Proust and the Squid, The Story of Science and the Reading Brain by Marianne Wolf. And that one was, it was okay, but what I found interesting was how she focused a lot on childhood literacy rates and how it's very important for children to be able to read and have access to books and reading, so that it develops their mind and helps them in the future. And so the people who did not have that access or do not have that ability to read have actually been way behind in their development than the people who have been able to. And I mean, that's common sense, but just knowing how reading a little bit or, starting younger just puts you way ahead in your pacing and your, your ability to succeed more than any other feature was what she had talked about. So I just, especially in the news now and how so many books are being banned and they're keeping children away from literature and stuff. I just think that was a very interesting topic. And she also, since it's talking about Proust, he actually wrote a book on reading, which I would like to read. And just how she was talking about how when you read and you find your favorite book, you know what you were doing when you read it. You know when it was. You know how old you were. Like it's a core memory for people. Just like how Proust, when he wrote his In Search of Lost Time series, the cats, come on guys, the Search of Lost Time series, he talked about the sense of smell and how it could bring them back to memories and stuff like that. And she posited that it was actually just as important, the core memories of reading being able to bring you back. And so I just want to hear from you guys, what is that core memory? Like when you read your favorite book, do you know exactly where you were, what you were doing, how it made you feel? And please, if you're interested in sharing, I would love to hear that. The next three are all Roman history books. SPQR, A History of Ancient Rome by Mary Beard. Dying Every Day, Seneca at the Court of Nero by James Rum, and Alaric the Goth, An Outsider's History to the Fall of Rome by Douglas Boyne. And I did enjoy those. I do prefer certain parts in history. So as much as Alaric the Goth and SPQR were interesting at times, they also were very dense. And so unless you really wanted to know about that part in history, I wouldn't overly recommend those. But I thoroughly enjoyed Dying Every Day. That one was one of my favorite reads out of these, just because that is a part in history that I really enjoy. So it's Seneca, the Court of Nero, which also spoke about Agrippina, Nero's mother, and slightly about Claudius and his other wife, Messalina. And so one of my favorite books is I, Claudius. And so I had all that back history already known. But I really want to read a biography. I already have it planned for soon when I can get to it, for Messalina's and Agrippina's biographies. I just find those absolutely fascinating. So anytime I can read a book about them, I will enjoy it. I also just really enjoyed this book because I am into Stoicism and stuff, so I know a fair well about Seneca, and just reading this book and how his philosophies and stuff were never actually, they never were practiced. Like he was saying all kinds of things, but then he basically lived the opposite. And so that dichotomy there, the duality is always fascinating to me. Like when you know better, when you're trying to teach better, but then you fall into these same things that you're warning against: greed, power, influence, and all that stuff. So I found that book very interesting. It also has, slight cameos that I always enjoyed. So, it was during the time of the apostles. So, you heard about Peter and Paul, mostly Paul, and his imprisonment and stuff, because it happened during the reign of Nero. And I didn't realize, but now I'm fascinated by all these theories that Peter and Seneca were friends and acquaintances and wrote letters to each other because they're both like the pinnacles of their teachings and their religions. So I mean, it sounds very much like fan fiction to me, but I am interested. I would like to read a historical novel or something that kind of explores that. The next ones, I read a couple of fiction. So Perfume, The Story of a Murderer by Patrick Sukin. Suskin. And so, oh my gosh, that story, I don't even really know how to describe it. It was good. I really enjoyed it. But there's really no way to like put it, you know, like is it horror? Like it almost read like a classic. It was written in the 80s, but it was set like I don't remember if it was the 17 or 1800s, but in France. And so it just had this old-timey feel with like morals and like a whole lot of things going on underneath the surface. I'm really sorry about my cats. I keep trying to put them in a room, but they can get out and I don't know what to do. So anyway, Perfume is about this kid who, when he was born, his mom was like an unwed woman. So whether she was a prostitute or just unmarried, they've actually beheaded her. And then, a sense of irony, the priest who took the baby and wanted to, you know, love and raise this kid, named him Jean Baptiste, which John the Baptist was also beheaded. So I felt like that was kind of a telling thing that he was given to his child, or this child. But what is weird is this kid did not have a sense, or he did not smell. There was no scent to him, and it freaked out that guy. So he sent him away to be raised by someone else, and then that woman didn't think anything of it because she had no sense of smell. So she didn't know that that he did not smell. But she had a really rough life, so she never learned empathy and love and compassion and forgiveness. So this kid was just, you know, he was provided for. He was not, you know, raised or loved or anything like that. And so it almost had this feeling of like a retelling of Frankenstein, with the monster and stuff, you know, rejecting or being rejected by society, and therefore rejecting society in general, being so hurt by not being loved by the one who created him, and that he went on a rampage. And it sort of had that same theme to me. But so anyway, he himself, as he grew up, had a very good sense of smell. He became a perfumer and could just, every little scent in the perfume, he knew exactly where it came from. He knew how to get it. He knew how to make the best perfumes. And then this is where it gets strange, but also fascinating. He smells a virgin, and that is the best smell that he's ever heard. And so he actually starts killing. I'm not giving spoilers because it's right in the title, The Story of a Murderer. Because he wants to catch this scent and be able to replicate it. But it's hard, so it takes more than just one time to replicate it, type of thing. And the idea, I feel like it's almost a satire about how we put so much emphasis on purity and virginity, especially in women during that time period, how they have to be so virtuous and perfect. I think he was, you know, commenting on that, which is fascinating to me to see the way he did that. But also how this guy, when he makes this perfume, he then uses it, and I'm not going to spoil how, in ways that, because if he has no scent and now he has the best scent and people are attracted to it and they don't know why, and they go from hating him to like desiring him, and and that kind of power that he would have. And I don't know quite. I haven't quite figured out like what he's trying to do. If he's trying to, you know, satirize the quest for purity and stuff into making it into a power, and how maybe we should give them more power, or we're giving them too much power and putting them on a pedestal. I haven't figured out how my thoughts correlate into that story yet, but it was so weird and unique, but it was a good story. The next one I read was, or these ones I actually listened to, the No Boy by John Akata. Okay, so this one is from 1957, and No Boys were boys that were Japanese boys who were in the internment camps during World War II, when Roosevelt rounded up all the Japanese Americans because he didn't trust them, because Pearl Harbor had just bombed the United States. And so he therefore thought that all Japanese people were untrustworthy. And so he basically put them all in concentration camps, and they were horribly treated there. And then when we needed more soldiers, they finally went there and, you know, made them make this pledge. They had to answer 2 questions, and if they said no to both, which became No Boys, they could be imprisoned. And so approximately 300 people served time in federal prison for refusing to join the military from these camps. But why would you, after you were so badly treated by your own government, then risk your life to die for them? Like, it makes sense why they would say no. But the questions are essentially, would you be willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States and combat duty whenever ordered? And so some people were questioning, like, why would I fight for you, like I said, after what you just did for me? And the other ones were, well, I will fight for you if you release my family first. And of course we say no. So, you know, they say no. And then the next question was, will you swear unqualified allegiance to the U.S. and faithfully defend them from all attacks from foreign and domestic forces? And part of that was also to forswear any allegiance to the Japanese emperor. And so the people who are saying no to that, whether or not they wanted to actually pledge allegiance to the United States, some of them were just confused by that question. Some of them did not want to pledge allegiance to the United States. And then some of them were thinking, if I say yes, then I'm going to now forswear allegiance to Japan. Does that mean that you're thinking that I did have allegiance to Japan when I didn't? And so those were confusing questions that people didn't know how to answer, and sometimes knew exactly what they were saying and still said no. And so this story is about a boy. It's a novel, so it's not autobiographical or anything, because the author actually did serve in the military. I don't remember which branch, but he wrote a story which was so revolutionary at the time, because Asian Americans are model immigrants who everybody is supposed to be striving to be like, because of, you know, their submission to authority, because they don't get into trouble and anything like that. And so he kind of turned that on its head and wrote a story about this boy who spent time in prison because he did not want to answer yes to either of those questions, and how ostracized they were after. And even if he hadn't been a no boy, he was showing how badly the Japanese people were still mistrusted and treated back then, because it was shortly after the war. And so this disillusionment that so many of them could have had, or very likely did have, about a government who treated them so badly for no reason at all. And they didn't understand how, well, we're not the only ones that you're at war with. You're also at war with Germany. Why did you not put all your German American citizens in these camps and stuff? So there's just so many political and distrusting questions that he discussed here that were fascinating to listen to. And also the character's mom was a supporter of Japan, and she believed that Japan won the war. She would not take any criticism that they didn't. And that was a kind of a unique thing where the son had to kind of toe the line, because he had already gotten in trouble for saying anything that wasn't even close to the disrespect that she was giving. So it just was showing like how complicated that situation is, and how the effects rippled down into different generations. And nobody was reading it at the time, and even the Japanese people, according to the foreword, were scared to read it, because they didn't want to be associated with being anti-American when they were trying to keep their head down, not cause any problems, and not have given them reason, for their imprisonment. So like, if you turned out to be a no boy, it kind of almost justified the American government in saying, see, we captured some spies, see, we were right to capture all of you, type of thing. And so many have had mixed opinions and views on this, which is true for any conflict in the United States or in the world, where you have two sides that are complicated sides, and you have people who are not just either straddling both, but they're part of both sides. They're American just as much as they're Japanese, and it's people were only seeing this Japanese side of them. And this is why books are important. And I'm glad that I read that one. It wasn't great, but it was definitely a good, important, necessary read. And because I had read so many hard things this month, especially after reading Beartown, I took a little break to cleanse my palate, and I read a sapphic romance, Here for the Wrong Reasons, by Lydia Wang and Annabelle Paulson. And it was a fun romance where these women go on and are contestants to like a reality, like a Bachelor type show, and one of them there is going there specifically to gain followers. Like, she has no intention of ever getting chosen or going too far on. She just wants to have enough clout to maybe get a couple branding deals and stuff like that, and ends up falling for one of the other female contestants. So it was a good break from all the heavy drama. And then after that, I went right back to the hard stuff with Men Who Hate Women. It's a nonfiction by Laura Bates, and she discusses this culture of men who they don't even refer to women as women. It's like they're dehumanizing them so much that they're I think the word was like a abbreviation or it was for female humanoids. That's how little they devalue women. And that just goes for anything in history, how that, insects, rats, roaches, like all the ways to dehumanize people. First Hitler with the Jews in World War II, and now Israel with the Palestinians now. And then how they devalue people with who are homosexual and everything, or have any kind of anything that they want to dehumanize. They pick the worst words that they can think of that are considered pests or that are bad associations, and now they're also have this whole group who are doing it to women, because then when they rape or beat or murder women, it's not so bad because they're subhuman type of thing. And so what was interesting is how she explores this subculture that was actually terrifying. Not just because, like, yes, I knew about so much of it, but some of their thoughts and the rhetoric that they're using was so outlandish, and it's so weird that people would even not only believe those things, but like repeat it and have this whole philosophy and following behind it. And it also talked about how closely those organizations are with the ones who hate women. They're not just sexist, or they're also racist and homophobic and anti-Islamic, anti-Semitic. They wrap in all the bad stuff all together. And so a lot of the mass shootings that we have in the United States can be linked to these things, and then we call it, we don't ever want to call it terrorism, which is what it is. We don't want to call it hate crimes, which they are. We just usually talk about just the violence or how damaged and mentally ill the guy was, without ever saying what actually is behind a lot of these motives. So even when they're going into mosques or churches or synagogues, even when they're mass killing different races and stuff on the street, it still links to their hatred for women, because they're either in their minds getting rid of their perceived competition, or they're getting mad at women who are with these other, white women who are with these minorities, because they're making their line unpure. And so all these different reasons are all entangled into this growing philosophy that's going on, these teachings, and it is utterly terrifying to know how radical they are. On top of that, if you want a good companion book, although I wouldn't read these together because this one was quite dark, Jesus and John Wayne is a great one, because it talks about Christian nationalism and the rise of having a big tough guy wielding power, which they think makes them men again, because they feel like all this political correctness, women's rights, all these issues are making them lesser men, so they have to like reclaim their place on top type of thing. And so that reading that and seeing how that progress into all the people now who voted for Trump, it totally makes sense when you see that, and then you read Men Who Hate Women, and you see the similarities there, and how far we've come, or actually how far we've fallen, really. And then the last two that I read were the Medicis and the Borgias. Those two books were by the same author. That was Paul Strathern. And I definitely preferred the Medici book. Right after Dying Every Day, that one was probably, they're both 4.75, 4.5 stars for me. Just once again, it's stuff that I personally prefer. I already know a lot about the Medicis, so that specific stuff wasn't anything new to me. I especially liked that it extended past Catherine de Medici, which she is my favorite. But what I actually found the most fascinating in this book is, so it starts with the rise of banking in general. And this is where you get the religious aspect and thing of it, because Jews were basically made to be the bankers and stuff, because Christianity saw usury, banking, debts, and all that stuff, money lending, all that stuff was illegal in the banks, in the church. I mean, in the churches. So they didn't want any Christians doing it. So they did not allow Jews to do much other work. So they were then forced into banking. And then we, have the audacity to have all these stereotypes about them for their money problems and issues and stuff, when we're the ones who thrust them into that role. But during the time of around the plague, around the there was a collapse and like a depression, and the Medici family got into banking and then started taking over. They were Catholic, or at least said they were Catholic, whether or not they were practicing or believing. Even one of the Medici popes were most likely agnostic, but they were kind of in the right place at the right time, and then started transforming the banking industry into what it was. And they actually first started out, one of their big clients was this really corrupt cardinal that nobody else would loan to, and one of the Medicis did, and he ended up essentially, buying his way, corrupting his way up into being a pope, and then used them for the banking. So then they had all the funds of the Vatican, which then raised them up quite significantly. And so it was kind of really interesting to learn the banking industry. I used to work in banking. I also really loved the book Debt, which was the first 5,000 years of basically learning about money and all this stuff. So a lot of that stuff was in there, minus the Medici part, which I find fascinating anyway. Any kind of history, but especially like a global history that it impacts us all. But once they were there in funding, a lot of the church's revenues comes from selling indulgences, which was their the way to pay for the forgiveness of their sins, so that they could then kind of either quickly go through purgatory or bypass purgatory, depending on the lesser of the sin and the more you pay in indulgences. And then they also would go around and sell or buy what they perceived as religious artifacts, holy artifacts, like a lot of movies and historical fiction thrillers and stuff feature the spear that pierced Christ, or the robe that he was wearing that got divided up, and so many of these relics could then be sold to people, and once again the church would get this money, and so you see that you see that kind of going on, which then leads directly into the Reformation. So in 1517, you have Martin Luther, who nailed his 95 Theses on the wall. I know this all. I grew up Lutheran, and so he wanted to break from the church for many reasons, but namely because by that time, under the Borgises and the Medici families being Pope, and you had the corrupt Pope Alexander VI, which was one of the Borgises, and he hated that once the church was low on money again, they would go and knock door to door trying to sell these indulgences to the poor people to pay for their coffers, to fill them up and stuff, which they're the ones doing more sins and the biggest sins, and then they were trying to collect and profit off of the fear that they put in to everyday citizens that their sins were going to send them to hell. And so that was part of his reasoning for his break from the church. But then you also have all the other reformations going on at the time, and then you have Henry VIII and all that stuff. So that time period utterly fascinates me, and I just liked to see the through line through here of how it started couple hundred years prior and kind of grew up into that. So I just that was interesting to me. And then the part that I really enjoyed the most about the Medici book was both families, they funded art. We have the Renaissance because of these families, but the churches as well. The churches with this Reformation happening, they needed to stop the hemorrhaging of losing their congregants to Protestantism. So they helped also fund all these arts. That's why there's so many artists that do, you have the Statue of David, the Sistine Chapel, all these glorious art pieces that were Christian, Catholic funded, to get people back into the Catholic Church, to get them caring about something and hoping to draw them either back from the Protestants or to keep them from flowing out and becoming Protestant. So I just, that part, when they talked about the art, because art is another topic that I love, but they actually focus on 4 artists, which, brilliant. I grew up watching and loving the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. My favorite was always Raphael. I liked Raphael and Donatello the best. The moody one with the cool weapon size, and then the very intelligent scientific one with the bow. I actually have been teaching myself both bow and size since then, but I didn't know much about them as artists because everybody knows about Michelangelo and Leonardo. And so this book focused on Donatello and Raphael as well, and some of their famous art pieces, and how both of them worked with different Medici family members. And Donatello ended up being very fascinated, and I would very much love to find a really good biography of Donatello. But just getting, the mini biographies of these artists, the influence of art in that period, and the Renaissance as you go from art into science. So then you ended up getting into Galileo towards the end, and how much more important it is once you realize how terrified the Catholic Church was of losing members and stuff, and had to fund art, that now when science comes in, especially with Galileo saying that the earth revolved around the sun rather than the other way around, because that took out so much of the church's teachings, especially with not just creation, but when you talk about the Battle of Jericho with Joshua, and how they're going around the city, and then the sun stops in the sky. Well, if the sun isn't revolving around the earth, or if the earth isn't flat with the sun able to just stay stopped in the sky, how do you explain it when it's revolving around the sun and in constant movement? So they were terrified of Galileo, and that is so much more fascinating when you have all that backstory of why. Yes, it was the story of the Medici, but it was the story of the all of Renaissance, and that time period, and how how much there is for us to learn. I definitely, it, you know, made me want to read so much more about that time period. Even more than I now know that there's specific parts I want to learn to improve my knowledge of that time period. So if you do have any suggestions on any of those topics during that time period, please let me know. And those are the books that I read this month, the rest of this month. I do want to make one more recommendation in regards to the fish that ate the whale. Since it's about government corruption, and I was talking about the CIA coups and overthrowing and stuff, you can get a very good parallel or jumping off point from that into reading the book, The New Confessions of the Economic Hitman. And that deals with the CIA backed coups in a bunch of these different places in Central and South America, as well as overseas. And it's part memoir, and that part I wasn't very interested in. But when it was talking about the governments and the events in each of these countries, that part was very good, and it still stuck with me. And I read that book several years ago. So those two together gives you a really good jumping off point into understanding the coups and the CIA influence and stuff at that time, which has kind of helped me understand a little bit more going into 100 Years of Solitude, which I'm excited to talk about in my next video. So those are the books I read this month. I had started but had not finished Betty, and I don't remember who that writer is, but I'll obviously be talking about it in my next wrap up. But man, is it another brutal read. I am gonna hope that some of the books that I chose to read this month in September are gonna be lighter, because I've already started off with something quite heavy. But that is what I enjoy the best, so I guess I just have to temper it with a little something else. So if you have any suggestions for something for Shorty September that's really short, but a good and happy and light read, also let me know. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope you made it this far through the video. I know I rambled a lot, but I had a lot of thoughts on a lot of books, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and happy reading.